Today, we embark on a somber yet incredibly profound journey through 19th century philosophy, exploring Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most controversial and pessimistic thinkers in history. We'll delve into his key ideas: the will to live, the inevitability of suffering, and the nature of human desires. Why did Schopenhauer believe that life without suffering is impossible? How does his philosophy help us understand why we constantly feel dissatisfaction? Stay with us. This video will make you ponder the nature of life and desire. Let's start with a brief introduction to the life and philosophy of Arthur Schopenhauer. This 19th century philosopher was known for his bleak views on the nature of life and human existence. Unlike his contemporaries who spoke of progress and happiness, Schopenhauer believed that life is an endless struggle for survival, inevitably leading to suffering. At the core of his philosophy is the concept of the will to live, the fundamental force driving every living being. Will to live and the nature of suffering. Schopenhauer believed that everything living is driven by one universal urge, the will to live, German, der Wille zum Leben. He used this term to describe a deep, unconscious force that propels all beings on Earth. The will to live is not merely a desire to survive. It is a powerful urge for existence and reproduction, independent of reason or conscious decisions. For Schopenhauer, this will is a fundamental and unconscious force present in every human, animal, plant, and even in nature itself. It is the instinctive drive that pushes us to seek life, fulfill our needs, and achieve our goals. However, within this drive for life lies a paradox. While the will to live motivates us to constant action and seeking, it inevitably leads to suffering. Why? Because, according to Schopenhauer, human desires are infinite, but their satisfaction is always temporary. Once we achieve one goal, whether professional success, personal happiness, or material wealth, a new desire emerges on the horizon. We strive to satisfy it, and this process repeats endlessly. This creates what is known as the cycle of dissatisfaction. When we passionately desire something, we feel discomfort and even suffering, as there is a gap between our desire and its fulfillment. We experience anxiety, doubts, and frustration because there is always the possibility of not achieving what we want. But even when the goal is achieved, the joy of fulfillment quickly fades. At the moment of satisfaction, one feels only brief relief, but then a new desire emerges and the cycle begins again. Schopenhauer argued that this never-ending pursuit of desire is the source of all human suffering. Each new desire brings a new form of suffering, as it again leads to worries, anxieties, and dissatisfaction. This is the tragedy of human nature. We are always striving for more, but this striving never brings lasting happiness. Thus, the will to live is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it drives us and allows us to grow, achieve goals, and survive. But on the other hand, it becomes the source of constant pain and disappointment. This cycle of endless desire and dissatisfaction, according to Schopenhauer, is the primary cause of human suffering, and he believed that it is impossible to completely escape this condition. Desire as the source of suffering. In Schopenhauer's view, desires are the main source of all human suffering. He argued that all our aspirations and needs are driven by the deep will to live, which compels us to constantly seek fulfillment. However, this pursuit contains an inevitable paradox. Even when our desires are fulfilled, we do not achieve long-term happiness and contentment. Human desires are diverse. We seek comfort, security, material well-being, love, recognition, and many other goals. At first glance, it seems that achieving these goals should bring us happiness and peace. But, as Schopenhauer emphasizes, the problem is that even if we achieve what we desire, this happiness is fleeting and temporary. Achieving one goal does not lead to lasting satisfaction because once one need is met, a new one arises, and the cycle begins anew. This cycle of desires, in Schopenhauer's view, inevitably leads to suffering. As long as a person desires something, they are in a state of lack and dissatisfaction. They suffer because they have not yet achieved what they want and feel anxiety over the uncertainty whether they will ever attain it. But even if the goal is reached, the satisfaction does not last long, as the desire either fades away or is replaced by a new one. This process creates a continuous feeling of dissatisfaction as our needs are reborn again and again. Schopenhauer stressed that this drive for new desires is endless. As soon as we get what we wanted, we realize that it does not bring the deep, lasting happiness we had hoped for. For example, a person might strive for wealth, believing that money will make them happy. But upon achieving material well-being, they soon discover that it has not relieved their inner torment. Then new desires appear: more money, more recognition, more comfort, and so on indefinitely. This cycle, which Schopenhauer called the ever-thirsting will, is an inseparable part of human nature. In his view, desire is the driving force of all life, but it is also the cause of suffering. Suffering is inherent in the very nature of desire because it implies a lack, dissatisfaction, and a striving for something we do not have. Therefore, desire, being an ongoing process, will never allow us to find peace or complete satisfaction. For Schopenhauer, it was clear that this cycle cannot be broken. Human nature is such that we will always want something. It is impossible to completely abandon desires because they are rooted in the will to live itself. We continue striving, hoping for future satisfaction, but each time we find ourselves back in a state of dissatisfaction. This constant cycle is the source of our anguish and suffering, and in Schopenhauer's view, it is a universal law of life. Schopenhauer's pessimism. Life is suffering. Schopenhauer was one of the most pessimistic philosophers in history, and his view of life was inseparably linked to the idea that suffering is a fundamental and inevitable part of human existence. In his philosophy, he argued that life is essentially a constant struggle, and everything around us is a source of suffering. From the moment of birth until death, a person faces physical pain, disappointment, dissatisfaction, anxieties, and moral burdens that accompany them at every stage of life. Schopenhauer believed that the root of suffering lies in the very nature of life and the will to live, which drives us to constantly strive for something and desire more. This striving generates an endless chain of desires that can never be fully satisfied, leading to constant dissatisfaction. Even when a person achieves certain goals, it brings only temporary relief, followed by a new wave of suffering and disappointment. In his view, happiness is merely a brief respite between two phases of suffering. Schopenhauer noted that physical pain is just one form of suffering we are subjected to, but far from the only one. Psychological and moral suffering play an equally important role in a person's life. We constantly face disappointments when our expectations are not met, when we lose loved ones, when our ambitions remain unrealized. These internal sufferings are often even more torturous than physical pain, as they penetrate the depths of our consciousness and continue to torment us. Schopenhauer also emphasized that even those who have achieved success and seemingly fulfilled their desires inevitably face disappointment. For example, a person may attain wealth, recognition, or love, but ultimately discovers that it does not bring lasting satisfaction. Every time a goal is achieved, a new one arises, followed by new suffering. The pursuit of something greater and better is an eternal race that does not lead to a final point of peace and happiness. However, suffering for Schopenhauer is not just an accident or a side effect of life. He believed that it is deeply ingrained in the nature of being. Humans are fundamentally doomed to suffer because their desires and ambitions will never be fully satisfied. Even the very drive for survival and reproduction is a source of suffering, as it requires constant effort and struggle for resources, attention, love, and status. Each of us is engaged in a continuous competition for a better place in life, and this struggle is inevitably accompanied by disappointments and failures. Moreover, Schopenhauer believed that life is not just a series of sufferings, but a constant confrontation with the negative aspects of existence. Illness, aging, loss, death. All these inevitably await every person. We can try to avoid this, but suffering is unavoidable. Even when a person tries to surround themselves with comfort and protect themselves from pain, they cannot fully rid themselves of the fear of future sufferings that will inevitably come. The main question Schopenhauer raises in his philosophy is how one can break free from this eternal cycle of suffering. His pessimism left little hope that a person could ever completely rid themselves of pain and dissatisfaction. However, he offered some paths to liberation. primarily through renunciation of desires and awareness of the temporary nature of satisfaction. He argued that only by abandoning striving or immersing oneself in art and contemplating beauty can one temporarily escape this endless cycle of suffering. Thus, for Schopenhauer, pessimism was not just a personal worldview, but a philosophical principle based on his understanding of life as a continuous series of sufferings and dissatisfaction. The path to liberation, renunciation of desires and turning to art. Despite his grim outlook on life, Schopenhauer did not leave humanity entirely without hope. In his philosophy, there was a path to liberation from suffering, albeit a temporary one. The main cause of human suffering, according to Schopenhauer, is the continuous striving for the satisfaction of desires, which generates dissatisfaction and pain. Therefore, the first step toward liberation, in his view, is the renunciation of these desires. Schopenhauer argued that true happiness cannot be achieved through material goods or the realization of one's ambitions, as every fulfilled desire generates new striving, and a person becomes trapped in an endless cycle. The solution proposed by the philosopher lies in the conscious renunciation of the will to live, that unceasing striving toward goals that causes suffering. This path represents a spiritual discipline that involves renouncing material attachments, ambitions, and vanity. He emphasized that such renunciation is not just an external limitation from the world of things, but a deep internal understanding that desires and ambitions are inherently illusory. Renunciation of desires is an attempt to transcend human nature, which is inclined to constant striving for new goals and, therefore, to suffering. This path is similar to the Buddhist practice of detachment and the pursuit of enlightenment through self-denial and inner peace. Schopenhauer saw this as a way to achieve peace, liberation from the eternal race for happiness, and avoidance of disappointment. However, the philosopher understood that this path is available only to a few, and for most people, it is too difficult and radical a way to rid themselves of suffering. Therefore, he offered an alternative, more accessible path, through art. Schopenhauer considered art the highest expression of the human spirit, capable of temporarily freeing a person from the will to live. In his view, art allows us to distract ourselves from our daily concerns and desires, to rise above the hustle and immerse ourselves in the contemplation of pure beauty. It gives us the opportunity to transcend selfish ambitions and feel harmony that does not depend on our material needs. Art, according to Schopenhauer, offers us a unique experience, allowing us to temporarily break free from the tormenting cycle of desires. When we immerse ourselves in the contemplation of the beautiful, whether it be music, painting, or literature, we forget our sufferings and feel a sense of harmony with the world. Art provides temporary liberation, lifting us out of the will, as during these moments we stop striving for something. We simply enjoy the moment, asking for nothing in return. And this feeling of pure perception of the world allows us to briefly escape the power of desires and the suffering that accompanies them. Schopenhauer particularly valued music, considering it the highest form of art. In his opinion, music has a unique ability to directly affect human emotions and the soul, bypassing the mediation of reason and logic. He believed that music could convey pure will without involving a person in its cruel games. It creates the illusion of liberation from suffering, allowing one to briefly experience true bliss and tranquility. This experience of art, and music in particular, helps a person temporarily forget the endless struggle and enjoy a moment of serene contemplation. Thus, Schopenhauer saw art not just as a source of pleasure, but as a powerful tool that allows a person to temporarily transcend their tormenting nature. Art gives us the opportunity to find inner peace and temporary liberation from the sufferings that inevitably accompany our existence. Through the contemplation of beauty and immersion in art, we can, for a short time, escape the endless race for the satisfaction of desires and find rare moments of true tranquility. The path Schopenhauer offers does not promise final liberation from suffering, but it gives a person the chance to at least temporarily rid themselves of life's torments. Art and the renunciation of desires help to realize that happiness does not lie in material achievements, but in the ability to see the beauty of the world without striving to possess it. Schopenhauer's revelation, Art and beauty as salvation. Schopenhauer viewed art as a saving path from suffering, offering a rare opportunity for individuals to find peace by transcending the endless cycle of desires and disappointments. In his philosophy, he asserted that art is a unique space where one can temporarily escape the relentless will to live that pursues us and focus on the contemplation of pure beauty, untainted by personal ambitions or needs. It is in this process of contemplation that the moment of temporary liberation from suffering lies, which the philosopher regarded as the highest gift of art. Schopenhauer particularly emphasized music as the greatest of all arts, capable of directly impacting the soul. For him, music is the language of emotions that does not require words or rational understanding, as it appeals to the deep experiences of humans, bypassing reason. Music, in Schopenhauer's view, can convey the very essence of human existence, reflecting the will to live in its purest form while allowing individuals to rise above this eternal striving. This makes music a unique means of liberation, as it enables the soul to temporarily free itself from the burdens of earthly existence and immerse itself in the infinite harmony of sounds. Besides music, Schopenhauer also acknowledged the role of other forms of art: painting, literature, sculpture, and poetry. In his opinion, each of these disciplines allows individuals to experience moments of transcendent contemplation, when personal desires and pain recede into the background. In these moments, one ceases to be a slave to their ambitions and can observe the world in its purest form, devoid of personal interests. Art, thus, enables us to become a kind of selfless observers who can appreciate the beauty of life in its unclouded form, free from the weight of personal desires and needs. Schopenhauer was convinced that in such moments of immersion in art, one experiences true liberation from suffering. This temporary release does not eliminate the source of suffering permanently, but it allows us to forget, if only for a moment, our endless striving for something, our sufferings and disappointments. These are moments when one can experience harmony and peace, which are unattainable in the daily grind filled with cares and desires. The philosopher argued that such moments of immersion in art hold immense value for a person's inner world. In these rare instances, one feels the fullness of existence, unlinked to the satisfaction of specific needs or desires. Although these moments are fleeting, they have a profound impact on the individual, providing a chance to gain new strength and view the world from a different, deeper, and more spiritual perspective. In art, Schopenhauer saw a tool that allows us to temporarily forget the harshness of life and the suffering that surrounds us, feeling a connection to something greater than our own self. In Schopenhauer's view, beauty in art is not merely aesthetic pleasure. It is a way to touch something higher and purer. It liberates from selfish aspirations and allows us to experience the world in its most unadulterated form. Through art, one can rise above their suffering and gain a rare opportunity to transcend ordinary, earthly existence. This makes art not just a means of entertainment or expression, but a true salvation for the soul, which constantly suffers from endless desires and disappointments. The modern significance of Schopenhauer's philosophy. In today's world, Schopenhauer's ideas about the role of art take on new meaning. In the face of constant stress, information noise, and anxiety, art can become that island of calm and tranquility that helps individuals restore inner balance and step beyond the endless chase for success. Immersing ourselves in music, painting, or literature provides an opportunity to disconnect from external concerns and focus on beauty that asks nothing in return, except contemplation and perception. In this sense, art becomes a means of inner transformation, allowing us to overcome suffering through a touch of something eternal and unchanging. Thus, Schopenhauer's philosophy regarding art as a path to temporary freedom from suffering remains relevant even today. It reminds us of the importance of art in every person's life and its ability to serve as salvation from the burdens we face daily. Art allows us, at least for a brief moment, to escape the endless cycle of desires and experience genuine peace, making it a truly important element of human existence. The contemporary relevance of Schopenhauer's philosophy. Despite its pessimistic tones, Schopenhauer's philosophy remains remarkably relevant today. In an era where people live under constant stress, anxiety, and the race for success, his thoughts on the nature of suffering and desires provide important lessons about the essence of human existence and ways to overcome internal contradictions. We live in a world where consumerism, social media, and ideals of success create constant pressure, demanding that we achieve ever greater goals. Schopenhauer, with his idea of the will to live and the endless cycle of desires, offers us a sobering view of this continuous process into which we find ourselves ensnared. Modern society is oriented toward material achievements and success, often measured through career advancements, financial stability, and social recognition. However, as Schopenhauer notes, even when a person achieves their goals, their joy is fleeting. One satisfied desire is quickly replaced by another, creating a sense of dissatisfaction and inner emptiness. This leads to an unending pursuit of new achievements, ultimately resulting in burnout, anxiety, and depression. In a world where everyone strives to have it all, Schopenhauer's words about the suffering rooted in the very nature of desire become particularly relevant. Schopenhauer's philosophy also offers a key to understanding why modern individuals often feel tired and dissatisfied. Under the constant pressure of society and consumer culture, we forget that true happiness cannot be attained through the possession of things or social status. The desires we satisfy only temporarily subside, soon to be revived again. This cycle, as the philosopher observed, is part of our nature, and attempts to satisfy all desires only lead to increased suffering. Schopenhauer reminds us that it is important not only to recognize this problem, but also to find ways to break free from this closed circle. His ideas about the possibility of renouncing desires and turning to art offer alternative pathways to liberation from the endless race for happiness. In a context where psychological pressure on modern individuals becomes ever stronger, the concept of renouncing excessive attachments and rethinking one's true values can serve as a therapeutic tool of sorts. This does not mean we must completely abandon all desires or goals, but rather we should learn to differentiate between desires that lead to deep satisfaction and those that merely add anxiety and stress. Particular attention is paid by the philosopher to the role of art in liberation from suffering, and this aspect of his teaching takes on new significance in modernity. In the age of digital technologies, where we are constantly under the pressure of information and media content, art can become a space for restoring inner peace. Schopenhauer believed that art could distract us from the will to live, that is, from the continuous striving for something. It helps us temporarily break free from the demands of desires and immerse ourselves in a world of contemplative beauty. In a world where external achievements and recognition become the main goals, art reminds us of deeper, eternal values. For the modern individual, turning to art can become not just a source of pleasure, but also a way to combat anxiety and emotional exhaustion. Listening to music, immersing oneself in literature, or contemplating paintings allows us to step momentarily beyond the daily hustle and feel harmony with the world. This temporary liberation from the will gives us the opportunity to restore inner balance and view life from a less demanding and stressful perspective. Thus, Schopenhauer's philosophy continues to exert a profound influence on the thinking of people living in the modern world. It reminds us that our sufferings have deep roots in the very nature of human existence. Rather than constantly trying to overcome these sufferings through the accumulation of goods and the achievement of new goals, Schopenhauer offers an alternative path, recognizing the illusory nature of these pursuits and turning to deeper sources of inner peace, such as art, in the renunciation of excessive attachments. This teaching can serve as a valuable reminder for those weary of the race for success and seeking ways to a more meaningful and harmonious life. Schopenhauer's philosophy urges us to rethink the nature of our desires and sufferings. His bleak ideas may seem daunting, but they offer an important lesson. True happiness does not lie in material goods, but in the ability to renounce the endless pursuit of gratification. Art, beauty, and mindfulness are what help us temporarily free ourselves from life's burdens. Write in the comments how you relate to Schopenhauer's ideas. Subscribe to the channel and watch other videos to learn more about great philosophers and their thoughts.